By the time you were 7 years old, your financial future had already been decided. Not by your income, not by your job, not even by your intelligence. It was decided by something you never noticed happening. A sentence overheard at a dinner table, a look on your mother's face when a bill arrived, a silence that followed the word money in your house. You didn't choose it, you inherited it. And most people go their entire lives never realizing it's running the show. Daniel and Priya started at the same company on the same day in the same entry-level role. Same salary, same city, same rent, almost to the dollar. For 6 years, nobody could tell them apart on paper. Same raises, same bonuses, same opportunities. But their bank accounts told two completely different stories. Daniel checked his balance every single morning before he even got out of bed. He tracked every transaction. He panicked over a $40 dinner. He kept nearly a year of expenses sitting untouched in a savings account, earning almost nothing, terrified to move it anywhere it might be at risk. Priya never checked her balance at all. She booked trips she couldn't quite afford. She upgraded her apartment before her raise even hit. When friends asked how she managed it, she'd laugh and say, "It always works out." Here's the strange part. Neither of them could explain why they did what they did. Ask Daniel why he was so afraid of losing money, and he'd shrug. Ask Priya why she spent so freely, and she'd shrug too. Neither of them was choosing. Something else was. In the late 1990s, a group of financial psychologists set out to answer a question that sounds simple but isn't. Why do two people with identical incomes make completely opposite decisions with their money? What they found changed the way financial trauma is understood. They discovered that almost everyone unconsciously adopts one of a small number of deeply rooted belief systems about money, and they adopt it before the age of 7, long before they're capable of questioning it. One person grows up believing money is dangerous, something to be hoarded and protected at all costs. Another grows up believing money is the proof of love, so spending it becomes a way of feeling worthy. Another learns that money equals status, so every purchase becomes a performance for people who are barely watching. And another learns to obsess over every transaction, checking and rechecking, because somewhere in childhood, money and fear became the same feeling. None of these people chose their belief. It was installed, quietly, repeatedly, before language even had the words for it. And here's what should genuinely unsettle you. These beliefs don't fade with age or income. They tend to get louder. This is the story of two people who thought they were making rational financial decisions every single day. They weren't. And what happened when they finally discovered why will probably make you think differently about every dollar you've ever spent. Daniel's father lost almost everything in a business collapse when Daniel was 6. He didn't remember the collapse itself. What he remembered, without ever realizing he remembered it, was the tone in the house for the 2 years after. The quiet arguments, the mail his mother stopped opening in front of him, the specific, tight sound of his father's voice whenever the word money came up. Daniel grew up to be responsible, careful, disciplined. On the surface, that looked like financial maturity, but underneath it was something else entirely. Every dollar Daniel saved wasn't strategy. It was fear wearing a suit. Priya's story was quieter, but just as powerful. Her parents had grown up with very little, and every gift, every splurge, every unnecessary treat was their way of proving that things were different now, that love could finally be shown through generosity instead of survival. Priya absorbed the lesson without ever being taught it directly. Spending was connection. Saving felt like withholding love, even from herself. 2 children, 2 households, 2 invisible operating systems installed decades before either of them opened a single bank account. Now, here's the twist that most people never see coming. You'd assume Daniel, the saver, was clearly the responsible one, and Priya, the spender, was the reckless one. That's what a financial advisor glancing at their spreadsheets would conclude in about 4 seconds. But both of them were losing. Daniel's fear kept his money sitting in an account earning almost nothing for over a decade, quietly losing value to inflation every single year, while he told himself he was being smart. His caution wasn't protecting his future, it was slowly draining it. Priya's spending kept her one bad month away from crisis, no matter how much she earned. Every raise simply raised her spending to match it, a treadmill she never noticed she was running on. Neither of them was managing money. Money was managing them. This is where it gets even more uncomfortable, because this isn't really a story about Daniel and Priya. Somewhere in your own financial habits, there's a rule you've never questioned, a number that makes you anxious for reasons you couldn't fully explain if someone asked, a spending pattern that shows up during stress, during celebration, during boredom, a pattern that was never actually your decision in the first place.
Maybe you round every price down in your head before you buy something, a habit you can trace back to a parent who did the exact same thing at the exact same register. Maybe you feel a flash of guilt spending on yourself, but none at all spending on other people. Maybe the opposite is true. None of this makes you broken. It makes you human. Every financial personality on Earth was assembled the same way, quietly, early, and almost entirely without your permission. Daniel didn't change because someone told him to budget better. Advice like that had never worked before, and it wasn't going to work now. What changed him was a single afternoon, years later, when he finally asked his mother what those 2 years after the collapse had actually been like for her. She told him things he'd never known, how close they'd come to losing the house, how she'd learned to stretch a grocery budget nobody should have had to stretch that far. For the first time, Daniel understood that his fear wasn't really about his own bank account. It was about a 6-year-old boy who had absorbed his parents' terror and never put it down. Once he could see it clearly, named it, separated it from his current reality, something loosened. He didn't become reckless. He became someone who could finally invest the money that had been sitting frozen for years because the fear finally had a face and a source instead of just a feeling. Priya's shift came differently. A friend, half joking, once asked her, "Would you love your parents less if they hadn't been able to afford all those gifts?" The question stopped her mid-sentence. Of course not. But somewhere inside her, generosity and love had quietly become the same transaction. When she saw that pattern for what it was, she didn't stop being generous. She just stopped needing every purchase to prove something that had never needed proving in the first place. Neither of them became a different person. They became themselves, minus the invisible instructions they'd been following without ever agreeing to. That's the part almost nobody tells you about building wealth. It's rarely a spreadsheet problem. It's almost always a story problem. A story that started before you could read, being run by an operating system you never installed on purpose. The most expensive financial mistake most people will ever make isn't a bad investment or a missed opportunity. It's spending an entire lifetime obeying a belief about money that was never actually theirs to begin with. So here's the only question that really matters. Not how much do you have, not how much do you earn, but this: if you trace your relationship with money all the way back to where it started, whose voice would you actually hear? If you know the answer already, say it in the comments below. You might be the only person in that comment section who's ever said it out loud. And if this made you see your own habits a little differently, there's another video waiting that goes even deeper into where these patterns come from and exactly how people like Daniel and Priya finally rewrote theirs.